Hey guys, before the video starts, I want to mention that I will be giving away a copy of God of War to a random viewer. Stick around until the end of the video to find out how to win. Over the years, God of War has established itself as a behemoth of a franchise. In fact, God of War is probably the Sony exclusive that makes a lot of people decide to go with a PS5 when purchasing a new console. Sure, The Last of Us is a great game, Horizon is kind of cool, but Kratos is the true poster boy for PlayStation. God of War is Sony's Halo. God of War 2018 absolutely blew people away with its complete stylistic change, showing a more human side of the God of War Kratos himself. It's a loving story about a father figure having to complete a task while focusing on the safety of a child tagging along. Whoops, sorry, wrong game. Kratos' wife died, leaving his son without a mom. Like a lot of dads out there, Kratos is a little rough around the edges. His lack of subtlety shows the need for a mother figure in a child's life, but him and Atreus eventually find their way, and there's some great character development throughout. God of War Ragnarok, a direct sequel to God of War 2018, released late last year to, again, pretty much perfect reviews across the board. Sony seems to be defining next-gen gaming with these groundbreaking titles, and yet, I just can't get into them. Now, before any hate comes my way, I want to say that obviously these are great games, and clearly the developers worked extremely hard. Everyone has a preference when playing games, no matter how critically acclaimed they are, and these games just aren't my style. I'm personally just a bit tired of the over-the-shoulder camera view that's used in 99% of AAA titles these days. I miss the simplicity of the original beat-em-up style God of War games, and I know I sound like an old man yelling at birds, but the classics were really something special. God of War released for PS2 in 2005, but that wasn't my introduction to the franchise. God of War Chains of Olympus for the PSP was the first game I played in the series back in 2008. Now I was 10 years old, and I don't remember too much about the game, but I do remember being absolutely blown away by the graphics and the fast-paced gameplay. Even today, I look back and wonder how they managed to fit a game like that on a UMD. My first time playing God of War 1 was in 2009 when God of War 1 and 2 released as an HD bundle for the PS3, and it absolutely blew me away. When the PlayStation 3 first came out, there weren't a lot of great first-party exclusives, and this was when Microsoft's Xbox 360 was putting out prime Halo and Gears of War games. A lot of Sony's marketing for the PS3 was based around graphical fidelity, with the use of Blu-ray discs on this console being such a huge deal. But there weren't a lot of titles that showed this off. Surprisingly, an HD remaster of a PS2 game is what did it for me. If you've only played modern God of War games, you're in for a bit of a surprise with the OG. In God of War 1, Kratos isn't the God of War. That title belongs to Ares, who tricks Kratos into killing his wife and daughter. No, not Faye from God of War 2018. Faye was actually Kratos' second wife to die. Poor guy can't seem to catch a break. The goddess Athena then tasks Kratos with the job of killing Ares as revenge. It's an over-the-top, unrealistic story that is full of non-stop action. Unlike the new God of War games, this one is based solely on Greek mythology, which I've always been fascinated by. The gameplay is very different than the modern titles. I believe the older games in the series were a lot more accessible. I could give my mom the controller while playing the original God of War game, and she would probably be able to string together some combos. It's really the style of combat that I enjoy, and I always praise games that are easy to play but difficult to master. The combat in the modern games just feels a little too rigid and technical for my liking. Although the storyline is probably seen as not up to par with the newer titles, I'm okay with that. To me, God of War was always the type of game that didn't require too much thinking. This younger version of Kratos was an absolute badass, with no control of his temper. He would just beat up anyone that pissed him off, and that intensity made the game so much more exciting. There was never a fear of losing. Throughout the game, you have some of the most memorable and epic boss battles in gaming. When I think about moments in gaming history that blew my mind, I remember the ridiculous size of the Hydra boss early in the first game. I also remember how casually Kratos just smacks the hell out of it, unlike the newer games where you can clearly see a bit of fear and hesitancy from him. It's that action movie vibe that I want out of a God of War game. For some reason, there's also QuickTime sex minigames in all of the old God of War games. I guess they really just wanted to show off how much of a playboy Kratos was. Although I prefer the first title, God of War 2 released in 2007 and is often regarded as the best game in the trilogy. Sony basically took everything from the first game and stepped it up a notch. Bigger bosses, refined combat, and an even wilder storyline. Honestly, if you like one of them, you'll like the other one. The third game in the series was the biggest step forward in my eyes. Earlier I talked about Sony's emphasis on graphics with the PS3, and with God of War 3 being designed specifically for that hardware, they were really able to show it off. At the time of release in 2010, I remember honestly thinking that was the best looking game of all time. Now I do understand why Sony made the choice to change up the style of the games with the newer releases. In 2013, God of War Ascension was released for the PS3, and while I loved it, most of the critics didn't. With a franchise as successful as God of War, even one game with mixed reviews can cause a company to totally rethink the way they go about things. And that's what happened here. These mixed reviews, along with the release of the PlayStation 4 shortly after, sparked Sony's reboot of God of War. I'm not by any means saying God of War 2018 and Ragnarok shouldn't exist. Really, if Sony released God of War 4 in 2018 with the same beat 'em up style instead of the God of War that came out for PS4, I might have been making a video talking about how they need to make a stylistic change. It's impossible to predict how these things would have ended up. All I know is right now, I miss the old God of War games. Alright guys, thank you so much to anyone who stuck around until the end of the video. As promised, I'm going to give away a copy of God of War for the PS2 to someone who likes, comments, and subscribes to the channel. Giveaway details will be in the description. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next one.